we'll do the live thing first. Like, hey everybody, welcome back to the Bigmark podcast. It's me, your host, Bigmark. If it's your first time listening, welcome. If not, welcome back. Like I always say, if you ever wanted to reach out to the podcast, please don't hesitate. Please hit us up on our DMs at the Bigmark Pod or at the Bigmark Podcast on Twitter or Instagram. If you are watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe to our channel. Like the video, subscribe to our channel so you know when our next video is going to come out and follow along with everybody. Wherever you are listening, if you're just listening to the podcast, please give us your time. I know it doesn't sound like much, but if you give us a good review, it really helps us with climbing the old algorithm, as they say, and getting more popular. And please share the podcast. Let your friends know, anyone you think would like what we're into. Like I always say, I'm trying to spread the love and connect the dots that maybe weren't necessarily the first in line to get connected. So again, thank you so much, everyone who's listening. And if you ever did want to donate to the podcast, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/thebigmarkpod. Again, thank you so much for listening. I'm really excited about today's episode because, you know, it's pretty near and dear to my heart. You know, I love our topic today. I love live music. I love listening to it. I love playing it. I love experiencing it in person. I love listening to it on an album. I like watching it in a video. Like, live music is something so interesting and it's so special. And I love it. And, you know, human beings' relationship with music is very interesting because it goes back so far. And, you know, its origin started, you know, anthropologically when we were, you know, tribal people, potentially still like living in the wilderness, and we played music as a group. We played music together, everyone, and it was mostly percussive. It was banging on logs and clapping our hands and stuff. But everyone in the village would take part in the music. Everyone was a musician and enjoy it. And, you know, it was part of some like building rituals and things to keep people in time for work. And then it was also used in sacred areas. You know, we're talking about basically just music in general, but obviously this is live. This is before you could ever record anything as far as music was concerned. So music was live. That's how human beings experienced music for the longest time, right? Like even up until like Beethoven and stuff, they still didn't have a way to preserve music where it was of any fidelity at all, let alone something that you could listen to and feel like, oh wow, I'm actually listening to the instruments that are playing this music. So when you wanted to hear this music, you had to go to a concert hall, and it was a big experience, and you got all fucking dressed up. And you went out and even into the days where we had recorded music, because the recordings probably weren't so great, the best place you're ever going to hear music is live. And truthfully, that's still the case. Now, most of the recorded music we hear today, if it's done with any like production value, sounds amazing. It sounds better than frankly, it sounds better than it could ever be live. You know, purely sonically with the music, and, you know, you can listen in headphones and you can just be in your own world. And, you know, it's one of those things that with technology, we've gotten to a place where listening to music at home is pretty good digitally and where we've got to. But in fact, we're actually starting to go back in time a little bit with things. You know, people are starting to go back to vinyl. And people are starting to look to lo-fi recordings and lo-fi tunage and getting away from that perfect sound. And it's funny, you know, we should talk about vinyl, because vinyl sounds better because it's a more natural sound. Even though it's recorded music, and we're talking about live music today, vinyl is analog. It's analog sound. It's more natural. Like the sound that's coming out of my voice, which is then being turned into a digital signal, which then you're listening to. But up until the point the sound of my voice hits this microphone, it's an analog signal, which meaning that there's actually something physical happening. My lungs are pushing out air in a certain way. And it's going over, and the shape of my mouth is changing the sounds, and I'm articulating and moving my mouth in a certain way that I'm pushing the air in front of my mouth out, and it's creating a wave. It's creating a sine wave. If we remember anything from math or I guess physics, if anyone got that far, a sine wave is just a kind of is the mathematical representation of a natural wave, right? It's very, very common in nature to see these waves, and that's the same kind of sound wave that's coming out of the speaker when you're listening to a vinyl, right? Like, yeah, there's a signal that's happening where there's electricity involved, but it's not digital. And again, the movement of the speaker is then moving the air in that way and creating that wave, and then your ear is interpreting it. And again, not to continue to be so tangential, but again, music truly does only exist in our heads. Out in reality, in physical space, music is just waves, air waves, angels in the airwaves and shit. And our brain is then capturing that, our ear is listening to it, and our brain is interpreting it. So truly, music only exists in our own mind. But back to live music, I think that's a big reason why we love live music, is that it sounds brilliant. And depending on the genre, but again, technology has gotten to a place with live music too that you can get really good sound, especially indoors in a well-designed building. With a good sound person and good equipment, you're going to hear things that you're not used to hearing. And again, not only listening and hearing art, like the audio of the performance, but you're also seeing the musicians perform, right? And that's such a major part. And yeah, there's some guys out there that just kind of stand on stage and do their thing, and it's still special to watch them and listen, and it's amazing. But there's something so special about watching, a band of people, or even just a solo artist, doesn't really matter, but, anyone go up on stage and play. And like I mentioned before, it was interesting because we all used to play together, when we were in tribes, and slowly but surely, one person kind of emerged as the best, and we just started saying, hey, why don't we all just watch this one person play? And for some odd reason, we elevated the musicians, and not even though everyone has this capability in them, and there's an innate way that humans, no matter whether they're a trained musician or not, we have an innate ability to pick out a wrong note in a series of notes that is supposed to be, we have all these inherent capabilities that we might not necessarily know why. Maybe they're a little bit learned, but at the same time, they're not trained in the sense we know why a note is wrong, but we can hear. And again, we all have this innate ability to be musicians, but yet we really elevate, the musician to a point where at least we're going to all give them our attention. Yeah, maybe they're not elevated to, a point where each musician, I being a musician myself, we're not necessarily everyone's great, even though the famous ones, we definitely elevate to that status. But again, we tend to, as a group, look to the musicians that are really good, and we really appreciate that. And we like musicians is basically what I'm saying. But again, there's something really cool about that, the performance aspect of it. Again, not only just elevating someone because they can play, but because they can entertain, right? And there's something so entertaining about live music, right? It gets you. And One of my favorite performers, I'll talk about him in a second, is Gord Downey. Rest in peace, but he had such an innate ability to just entertain. Whether it was the banter between songs, during songs, the way he acted, the way he moved, he was truly giving the audience literally everything he had, wringing himself out on stage, like that there was nothing left. And as an audience member, it just like, you couldn't help but smile, and it was just pure entertainment. And again, it's something captivating about good music. And we love it, and we love listening to it. And, we love, like I said, we love watching it, like music concert movies, like The Last Waltz, Another Day, Another Time, tremendous. The Last Waltz, if no one's seen that, that's the band. The band, that's their last show ever. And it was filmed and directed by Martin Scorsese, which is wild. But there's something interesting about a concert movie because you get closer, unless you're like fucking front row center, but even still, you're like looking up at this weird angle. You get some beautiful angles that you would never be able to see with some of these concert films, right? Because they got cameramen right up there. They're getting in there. They got fucking booms and shit. And the sound is great too. You're getting the sound right off the board. Sounds fucking tremendous. It's a great way to experience a concert with not actually going to a concert. There's this great concert film, whatever you want to call it. And it's Pearl Jam live at the Garden in 2003. Oh my gosh, amazing. There's so many great live music movies, again, if you will. Again, some of the live music that I've been lucky to see, there's some amazing bands out there that I've been, I just saw Iron Maiden the other day. They were amazing. Oh my gosh. Like, I'm not the biggest Iron Maiden guy. I respect them. I respect Bruce Dickinson. I respect everything, their place in music history. But that whole kind of 80s metal-ish genre, hard rock thing just has never been my bag. But their show was fucking amazing. And I had an opportunity to see the show. Shout out Sam, my boy, had an extra ticket, and I snatched it up. And it was fucking unreal. Like, I'm talking crazy set design. I'm talking each musician. You could watch each musician at any point, and they're putting on an absolute show. I mean, you couldn't really see the drummer, but everyone else is just playing to the absolute tits, killing it. They had this 10 foot tall, like, puppet dude, like, on stilts, who came out in 2 different costumes. They had a fucking costume change for the giant puppet. Just amazing. Like, really putting it out, balls to the wall, and really entertaining, knowing that they wanted everyone to walk out of that building saying, I just saw Iron Maiden and it was fucking sick. And it's funny because I saw years ago, I have the DVD of Metal a Headbanger's Journey, which is made by a Canadian filmmaker, and he basically created this chart, flow chart, if you will, of like the history of metal and, who started it, and, from Sabbath and Zeppelin and all these like early, rockers, King Crimson and shit, and all this branching out into death metal and glam metal and pop and all this shit. And he interviewed Bruce Dickinson. Obviously, Bruce Dickinson's involved. And Bruce said, talking about the, operatic performance nature of live music and metal, of course, but live music in general, is that him as a front man, every time he goes out and plays, he plays and he looks at the back, the very back, the guy who's you can barely see him behind anyone, and he finds him and he goes, you, and he points to him and he plays to that one dude, and the one guy goes, me? Oh my God. Like, again, making that guy feel like the show is about him. And that's that performance mentality, which we'll get into in a bit. But some of the other bands that I loved, obviously, like I mentioned, Tragically Hip, phenomenal. R.I.P. Gord Downey. Saw them a bunch of times. Saw them 2 years in a row, both on Canada Day, which was amazing because, they have such, they are steeped in Canadiana, right? Like they were Canada's band, and it's going to be tough to see them go. But I had a chance to see them at Massey Hall, which is one of my favorite venues, one of the most beautiful venues I've been to, and I also was able to see their second last show ever. So their last show ever they played in Kingston, but their second last show ever they played in Hamilton, and it was interesting because it was kind of like watching a guy do his own eulogy. And again, that's the thing with live music, right? Like it's, however you're feeling that night is how you're going to be performing. And I couldn't imagine as any single one of those guys in the band, there's no way that they were just thinking that this was any other show. And also, I was 8th row from the front. Like, I was right up there. I was right on the floor. And I swear I could feel people's energy directed at the stage. And it was a deep, deep sadness. And again, very interesting concert because I was grateful to be able to see them one last time for the 4th time, I think, at that point, but I wish it was many more. And there's many bands that have come and gone now that I've missed. I missed Rush. Neil Peart died. I thought I'd have a chance to see Rush for the rest of my life, basically, or at least for another few more years. And then Neil passed away, and then Fleetwood Mac's another one where, Christine McVie's now not with us anymore. I was lucky to see Yes. That was a tremendous show to talk about, people passing away. I saw them minus John Anderson, their lead singer, but he just had a throat operation. 2 guys since of Yes have passed away, Bill Burford and Rick Wakeman, R.I.P. And, Chris Squire and Bill Burford, I think. I think Rick Wakeman's still alive. Fuck. I'm sorry, guys. Anyway, Pearl Jam. Obviously, I mentioned Pearl Jam. I saw them for the first time in Toronto in 2006. And I went with my pops. And, I'd listened to Pearl Jam many times. My dad's a big fan. He's always been a fan. I feel like I grew up. Listening to Pearl Jam. And once I actually got a chance to see them, my whole perspective changed. The show that they put on and the way they sold themselves out to the music, not sold themselves out in a bad way, left every bit and put every ounce of themselves into the music and played for like over 3 hours and played till the lights came on, and just it was so cool and so special. And I never really, and seeing the fans' reaction and how many diehard fans there are, and it instantly made me a huge mega Pearl Jam fan. Instantly, as much as I already liked, I liked it. I liked their music. I wasn't like a huge Pearl Jam fan, but once I saw them live, man, it totally changed my perspective. And again, a huge, they're obviously a huge influence for me too. And another huge influence, Winter Sleep. One of the greatest concerts I ever went to. I was 13. And and I went to see Winter Sleep with my parents, and it was an all ages show at the Underground in Hamilton. And I was a young kid, but I was walking through the doors, parents are paying, and Buddy goes, whoa, 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 wait up. Like going into the bar area. He goes, hold on, wait up. You forgot your wristband. And that was like for people that were 19 plus, because it was all ages, but everyone who was 19 plus needed a wristband so that they could drink. And he goes, yo, you forgot your wristband. And he throws the wristband on me so I can drink. And I was 13. I mean, again, you know, I was like 6'4", I guess, at the time. So like I was a pretty big kid, but you know, still, I was like, oh shit. And I was with my parents and wasn't even thinking about drinking at that point. And although I could have went buck wild, but I was there for the music and I was super stoked. And they just put on such a good show. And it was one of those shows where, again, the Underground Hamilton is underneath another bar. So it's a basement bar. So it's low and it's intimate. And you just like, the music was fucking loud. And it was just like, it just went right into me. And they played some songs. Actually, they played one song called Weighty Ghost for the first, like one of the first times they ever played it. And it was so fucking good. And then they changed it for the album. They totally reproduced it and they changed it. What are you going to do? But at the same time, what the fuck? Because, hey, there's, I guess, a troublesome part about live music is that sometimes a band might play a song differently than they play on the album. And it might be good and it might be shit. Or they might be playing a demo for you. They're working on a song and they're going to play for you and you might think it's awesome. And just like I said about Winter Sleep, you might get to the point where all of a sudden, fuck, they changed it. They had to reproduce it. They had to make it radio friendly, whatever they had to do. And it's different. What can you do? But again, Winter Sleep, many times, and I've seen them in a bunch of different places, indoor, outdoor, you know, so many venues, right? Like there's so many different venues. There's, you know, again, outdoor amphitheaters like Budweiser Stage, seen some great shows there. You know, I saw Tool there. Oh my God, fucking phenomenal. And that was a weird one, right? Because I didn't know what it was going to be like outside, but we were under the canopy, so it kind of kept the sound in a little bit more, but it was still such an amazing show. And then you go to Massey Hall, like I mentioned, a little bit more intimate there, you know, like 2,000 people, you know, any bar where, you know, maybe there's 50 people there. And I remember seeing the Darcys, one of my favorite bands, at the Casbah, which is a great place in Hamilton. And again, there was maybe, I think the capacity is like 180. So there's maybe that many people in there. If that, 150 at the Casbah. Packed in there, loving it, sweating, killing it. The Key to Bala, amazing. I remember seeing one of the greatest shows I've ever saw was the Darcys again opened up for the Arkells. And I went with my Huntsville crew and Larson, basically, and Lep. And that was fucking awesome. The Key to Bala is, if no one knows, it's in the heart of Muskoka, essentially, on the lake. Beautiful, like, giant cottage, essentially. And just, like, sweating, dancing, killing it, loving it. Again, just so many great venues at the Kerner Hall. I just saw the Punch Brothers there. It's in Toronto at the Royal Conservatory for Music. Beautiful. This, like, not only looks amazing, but it's like acoustically created, like Hamilton Place in Hamilton here. Like, it's just acoustically designed. You're just getting amazing sound. I saw one of the Pro Jam shows I saw was at Joe Louis, which is an arena. You know, arena is the Console Energy Center. Another place I saw Pro Jam. Air Canada Center, another place I saw. So I've seen these bands in stadiums, and you still have these feelings. Like if you're a musician and you can play music, and you can make a stadium feel like a fucking bar, like that's amazing. You know, obviously, seeing shows, going to these places, loving it. I also love playing live music too. Not as much as I love seeing it. You know, I love being on stage. I love interacting with the crowd. It's freeing, you know. I grew up playing sports, and there's something about like you're entering, you're stepping on a field, you're stepping on the court, you're wearing a uniform, you're in this mode where you're no longer just Mark anymore. You're no longer whoever you are anymore. You're someone who's going to be a fucking animal or a genius or an artist or whatever it's going to be, but you are now essentially playing a part. And it's freeing in a sense. You get to do it and you get to play, and playing together and getting places and seeing crowds' reactions and all that is so special, and it's so wonderful. And it's interesting having all that experience, knowing that, and then going to see a live show, right? You respect the artist so much more. It's tough sometimes because maybe you get nitpicky and you've seen behind the curtain enough, and you start looking at the little things that maybe not everyone sees as well or cares about. But again, like, musicians or not, we all love live music, and there's something special about live music, and there's something that, it's tough that live music has gotten to a point where it's become so expensive, but because of streaming now, that's what it is. You have to pay this money. And really, again, this is the only way musicians are making money these days. So you gotta respect and you gotta support, right? And, like I said, musicians or not, we all love live music. Like I mentioned, Gord Downie, my boy, my favorite live performer. He once said Hamilton is the best city in the country to see live music. And that's fucking amazing. There's some amazing places in Hamilton. This is Hamilton, Ontario. Anyone who's never been, please come. Anyone who's listening, who's a Hamiltonian, shout out. Anyone who has never been here and just drove past us and thinks we're just that stinky place on the way to Niagara Falls, it ain't. Come down to Hamilton. Check it out. Go to the Corktown. Go to the Casbah. First Ontario, aka Cops Coliseum. They got big bands coming through, man. You guys can come and see, and maybe it's easier than going to Toronto for some shit. Like, come to Hamilton. Brickworks, Mills. There's some amazing places, which I'm lucky and privileged, and I'm grateful that I've had the chance to ever play any of them. And there's some that has come and gone, including the Underground, which I mentioned where I've seen Winter Sleep, and This Ain't Hollywood, a beautiful place. Again, lost to fucking condo building shit, god damn it. And it's bullshit because, Hamilton's already in a weird spot, as much as it's one of the greatest places in the country to see live music. It got fucked up with COVID. I think people are still a little bit tentative to go out, and because we truly only have kind of small bars, the Corktown, Casbah, places like that have, Lazy Flamingo, Doors, all these bars, small little places that are like, 150 or less. Mills Hardware, same idea. And none of them are places that you really go to drink. You go to see a band and you go specifically to see the band. You don't wander in, or you don't happen to be there when you're chilling. My band Reckless Harbor, shout out Reckless Harbor. Check us out everywhere. Reckless with a W. We just played the Dakota Tavern in Toronto. Amazing joint, but still a bar that you might just happen to find yourself in. And all of a sudden there's going to be sweet bands playing. We don't really have that. And all those small places, there's not like really an intermediary other than Brickworks now, which is very new and somewhat out of the way in my opinion. Great spot, and I love going there, and I hope to play there. But still, what I'm saying is you have to be purposely going there to see a show. You don't just kind of happen upon it and pay at the door and wander in. And that's what you need. You need a place that's centrally located, that you're just going to have people walking around and be like, oh, look at the fucking chalkboard says live music and drinks. Let's go in and fucking have a good time. You don't have that. And then on top of that, these small venues and Brickworks, you don't have another like intermediary jump until you're at like First Ontario or a Hamilton place, which is like a couple thousand, or like obviously 20,000 at Cops Coliseum at First Ontario. We need like 1,000 seater, 500 to 800, that like whole thing. Basically, what the Danforth Music Hall is in Toronto. So anyone who knows what the Danforth Music Hall is in Toronto, it's basically an old movie theater or theater that they just tore the fucking seats out. And that's what we need. And there is a place in Hamilton. It's on King Street. It's across from Gilbert's Big and Tall. It used to be an old theater. They used to have wrestling there and shit. Like, it used to be a fucking joint. It's sitting there abandoned, probably full of homeless people, like chilling, vagrants. If I had the money, I'm buying that place instantly. And that's becoming Hamilton's new venue for intermediary shows. And you're getting cool bands that are, you know, halfway in their career. They're not in the stadiums yet, but they're bigger than bars, and you're getting those bands. But now again, like we have that, we don't have that perfect balance. Even though the music's great and a lot of bands coming out of Hamilton are phenomenal, not to toot our own horn. Again, check Reckless Harbor out, but there's some amazing, it's a great scene, and it's very supportive, and everyone loves playing it. And again, check us out. Reckless Harbor with a W. We got some shit on YouTube. We're working on doing some recording. So have your ears peeled. I'll let you know as soon as that drops. But again, this is really the only way that you can really support your favorite bands. You can buy their merch, but that'll cost them money too. So go to the shows, support the bands, sing every fucking lyric as loud as you can at them. They love it. They want to hear about it. They want to hear how it makes you feel. Whether you're telling it to them or just showing it to them from the crowd. Pay, you know, yeah, it's tough to pay $300 for a ticket, but if it's $100, pay $100. Because we shouldn't spend money on things, we should spend money on experiences. And the band will give you that $100. They will give you that. If they're asking for that and they're being fair, they will repay you in that show, and it will be worth it, and you'll love it, and you'll go home from it, and you'll always remember it. Look at all this shit. Didn't take me. I wrote a couple of things down. I remember all these shows. I remember all these moments, and so much shit that I didn't even mention tonight. So go out there, support your local bands, support your favorite bands. Go out there and come and support Reckless Harbor too. Whenever you're listening to this, if you are listening to this before January 13th, Friday the 13th, Reckless Harbor is playing Clifford Brewing Company in Hamilton. Shows at 8. Check us out. Thanks for listening. Can't wait for the next episode. Thank you all for supporting the podcast. And if you ever need to reach out, if you wanted to give us some tips, or, you know, if I missed a fucking fact, or if you got an idea for a podcast episode, or you want to come on as a guest, reach out to us. Hit us up. Our DMs at the Bigmark Pod, at the Bigmark Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to our channel. We want to keep building that community. We want to build the Bigmark podcast community. And check out our Patreon too. Patreon.com/thebigmarkpod. Give us 5 stars. Share the load. Share it with your friends. Everyone who wants to listen to this, bring them together. Whether you think they're being into it or not. I want them to listen to the Bigmark Pod. Thank you all. Thanks for listening. Go support your local bands. Doot doot loot doot. Doot doot. Peace. Peace.